Hi everyone and welcome back. Today we are joined by Professor of Hand Surgery and Rehabilitation, Frank Burke. So thank you very much for joining us, Frank.
My pleasure, Andy.
So just as we were talking before, we were talking about your job title and that everyone knows you as a hand surgeon. So where does the rehab bit come from then? Is that?
Well, it was really, I think, a reflection on the interest I'd taken in hand therapy. And that took the form of, well, we were running courses for hand surgeons and getting what I'd like to think were the best in the world to come to Derby to share knowledge with our residents, our trainees. And if you do that, then you may as well open it up to everyone else, charge a fee, and every course has to run at a profit. And share the knowledge, and we did that for a few years, and then the logical sort of follow on from that was, well, if we're doing that and we've got all this faculty there, why don't we stick a therapist course on the end of the doctor's course for 2 days and make use of these people for the therapists as well? And they were enormously popular and attracted a huge amount of interest. And so Derby got a reputation for really pushing the needs of hand therapy and the educational needs of hand therapy. And when BART started off, the hand therapy national organization, I was their inaugural president. They stopped doing that after a few years in terms of a doctor doing it, and then they had their own presidents who were hand therapists. But to start off with, it was doctors who were asked to do it by them, and I was the first one. So that's really about the hand rehabilitation. That's why that sort of kicked off. And I've always had a huge enthusiasm for sharing knowledge, not just with doctors, but with therapists, because there's not too much we can do. Well, we can do quite a few things without them. But for instance, if you've got someone with a stuck down flexor tendon and you want to do a tenolysis to free up the tendon, if you don't have a good therapy team, my view would be probably don't even start, because the patient alone quite possibly may not be able to deliver the results you want, but you working with a therapist and a patient, the likelihood is you'll have a far more successful outcome. So I've always been tied up in the therapy side of things and very enthusiastic that they should benefit from all the education that's available.
Oh, great. No, that's really interesting. Well, we'll come more back to Derby and BART, etc. But from your perspective, how did you start off? Was medicine something that you were always interested in?
Well, my father was a obstetrics and gynecology consultant in Sunderland. And it's ironic, actually, the way it worked out. Because, when I became a consultant in Derby in hand surgery, there were only 2 hand surgery consultants in the UK, one in Derby and one in Glasgow. And my father was actually the first obs and gynae consultant in Sunderland. The work had been done before that by GPs and general surgeons. So many of the frustrations and difficulties I experienced playing a part in the development of hand surgery, my father had actually experienced, in terms of obs and gynae, for 40, 50 years before. And he unfortunately died before I became a hand surgeon, and so I was deprived of being able to ask him advice. But it is ironic that we should both have played a role in the development of a specialty. which doesn't fall to everyone, Andy. I think there'd be many general surgeons who perhaps would start off with a certain job description, and then 30 or 35 years later, lay down a job plan that might be not that different to the one they started off with. Hand surgery is not like that. It's been an evolving thing the whole time, and a real privilege to be involved in that development. So he was. I mean, I very nearly didn't end up doing medicine for bizarre reasons. I had two elder brothers, and they both did medicine. And one ended up as a GP in Cheshire, and the other as an obs and gynae consultant in the Northeast. And so when and they were in medical school, and then my father said to me, right, what do you think you want to do? So I said, I think I want to do medicine. So he said, well, you're only doing that because the other two are, sort of thing, you see. And he was a bit suspicious of my motives, I think. And so he said, I'd like you to spend a day doing law, accountancy, I don't know, something else. And I was a dutiful son. So I went and spent a day with an accountant and with a solicitor. They were all friends of his. And then at the end of it all, he said, right, what do you want to do? I said, I want to do medicine. So it's all right. So then and then the next big debate was where I would go, because my eldest brother was in Liverpool doing medicine, away from home, and having quite a good social time, and living in a flat somewhere. And my middle brother was living at home, going to Newcastle University, working hard and passing all his exams. So I said to my father, I said, I think I'd like to go to Liverpool to share a flat with Pete. So turned out to be one of the shorter interviews I had with my father. he just said, Newcastle for you, my boy. So that was it. I went to Newcastle, and I loved it. I think I found medicine, really very interesting. I've gone through life always wanting a guru of some sort. I think many people do this, and you may indeed do it as well. Just someone senior to you, that when you come to a crossroads, you will go and air the dilemma with them, because then they're on your side. And the first one I had was a pediatrician, in fact, in the Northeast, super guy. And I've all the way through, I've had gurus, and I've seen it, because it goes around. It's this whole business of you're an apprentice in medicine. You learn at the feet of others, and then younger people come and learn at your feet. And so how ready are you to be someone else's guru? And that was always very important to me. And there would be situations where, I don't know, in a clinic, a guy would come up to you, a trainee, and would say, look, do you mind if we have a word, sort of thing? And he would look troubled, shall we say, or thoughtful. Never dismiss that situation. Doesn't matter how chaotic the clinic is, never dismiss that situation. Fine, when the clinic's over, we'll go and have a cup of coffee, just the two of us, because it's a subtle, gentle cry for help, assistance, should we say. So I've been a great believer in gurus. I've had several over the years, and as a consultant, I had a guru actually. And then as you take on the role, you must always be available, and I'd like to think I have over the years. And that, I mean, Hippocrates wrote about this business of you learn at the feet of others, and then you have an obligation then to train others in the art and the science of medicine. So I had gurus, and the first crossroads you get to when you qualify is, is it general practice or is it hospital work, sort of thing. And I said I thought I wanted to do surgery, but I didn't know if I had the skill to do it. And he was a great guy, actually, my guru. And he said, he was a physician, of course. And he said, well, you only know when you try, Frank. And, and the thing I would say to you is aim high. Never look back afterwards and say, I wish I'd gone for that. Never be faint-hearted in your aspirations. It's lovely and right. And so I got a job in the teaching hospital as a houseman. It's marvelous times we had. Totally inappropriate by modern standards. I feel I must draw a veil over several years of my life. But and then it was what in surgery would you do? And I had a good orthopedic surgeon who newly arrived in Newcastle. And he helped me get into oswestry. And by then, I mean, the training process was interesting for us because you did 6-month attachments to various specialties, which of course gave you a biopsy of all of them. And, I don't know how you feel about it, but I think it's often the case when you're considering careers, you don't know what you do want to do, but you know what you don't want to do. So as often as not, it ends up by a process of exclusion. I mean, there are some people born with a sort of apparent desire to be a brain surgeon. I've always been very suspicious of people like that. I don't think that's the way it really is. And so, I thought when I worked all the way through all the specialties in orthopedics in a 4-year training program, and I liked the mechanics of orthopedics. I like the mechanistic approach to it, but I also love the delicacy of plastic surgery, but there were aspects to plastic surgery I didn't really like, not because I didn't think they were important. I mean, and the obvious things were boobs and noses. Noses, if someone's got a deformed nose, you break it, and then you aspire to put it in a better position. And, I mean, you'd think, well, what if it isn't in a better position at the end? And the other thing is, of course, it swells immediately. So you'll only know what you've done, a few weeks later when all the swelling's gone down. And breasts are a problem too, because, I mean, you've got to have two of the same size pointing in the same direction at the end of it all. And and it's not as if you can put a plate and screws on it to you know, to hold it in place. So that again is it's very demanding surgery, and I didn't really want that. I love the delicacy, but I didn't really want to engage in plastic surgery. And of course, hand surgery is the perfect combination of the two. It's very delicate, but it's very mechanical, mechanistic, biomechanics. They're all important, and I loved that. And then there was one other thing that I think put me to it, and also rehabilitation. In my final year, we were playing a rugby match, fifth year versus final year, and someone kicked the ball and it came up between my fingers and pushed the ring finger back and the other three forward. And I was studying for the exams at the time, and it was bruised. There was a certain amount of bruising to the skin on the finger, and I noticed that the tip joint wouldn't bend, and in fact I'd snapped my profundus flexor tendon. So I went to an orthopedic surgeon who was in Sunderland, actually, a super guy, family friend, very good surgeon, I think. Should have been actually in the teaching hospital, born to teach. So he repaired this thing. And I did my finals actually in a splint, which was great because it meant I couldn't really examine abdomens in obstetrics. You know, I had no idea whether a head was engaged, vacant, or whatever. You know, to me, the whole thing of obs and gynae to me is a total mystery. No idea what goes on. And so this was quite helpful to be in a splint. And then after I came out of the splint, because we didn't go for early movement in those days, it was rested on a splint for 4 weeks or so, then get it going. And I had my physiotherapy in the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle, and there was a therapist there who was brilliant. And I went for the first time, and I was detached really from it all because it was as stiff as a plank, basically. And I thought, well, that hasn't worked. And I wasn't particularly engaged. But this lady, she was quite a mature person, very experienced. I had no idea you could work so hard to flex or try and flex one joint. By the end of the first session, I was absolutely exhausted. And she was super. And I got a very good result. Where is it? Here we go. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's about 70 degrees, not 90, but 70. And I wonder if that was formative when I was in Oswestry, you know, sort of leading me also, supporting me in my decision that hand surgery might be an interesting thing to do.
What were the things that she was doing from a therapy perspective then, back then?
Sorry?
What were the tools that were being used to work?
Oh, basically flogging patients. That's how I felt about it. No, virtually nothing. Maybe a wooden block to lay on here that you would work against to try and, so you didn't want this joint moving, you wanted the one at the tip moving. So, and so there was that, but, and, you know, she did everything. She wasn't a hand therapist. They didn't exist, but she just was very experienced in hand therapy as it happened. And I don't think there's any doubt that got me going towards that. So I said to my boss in in Oswestry, I'd like to go and do a year abroad in which was beginning to come in. People would go to Europe for 3 or 4 weeks or 5 weeks between being a junior doctor and a consultant. But the idea of going away for a year or 6 months was not really common at all. And so I got a job with Adrian Flatt, who was in Iowa City, a Brit who'd emigrated to America. It's funny the way these things work out. He was visiting his sister in Lancaster, and Oswestry was very cosmopolitan. And there was a guy in the residence there who actually had worked with Adrian Flatt and said, he's a great guy, it's a great learning experience. Go to Iowa, that would be good, you see. So, and he said he's coming over. I happen to know that, and he's staying with his sister in Lancaster. So, so I then got in touch with his secretary in Iowa and got the telephone number for Lancaster. And his sister was lovely, actually. And so she said, well, come up, she said, and because he'll be here or whatever. So I went up, and he'd gone out for a walk, and I was chatting to her. And she and her husband ran a business exporting things to South America because of family contacts or whatever. And she said, we've got a terrible problem at the moment. She said, we need to find 2 Dalmatian puppies to send to Rio de Janeiro or somewhere. And so I said, oh, that's funny. I said, we've got a Dalmatian, and you know, and I know the name of a breeder or 2, if that would help, you know, that produce good stock. She said, if you could help with that, you know, we'd be enormously grateful. Anyway, Adrian comes bowling through the door, having had his walk. And she says, you know, oh, this is Frank Burke. You must give him a job. He sorted out my Dalmatian crisis. And that's the sort of serendipity of things. So he said, yeah, you can come. And we chose the dates. And he said, are you coming for 6 months or 12 months? And do you want to go to another place for 6 months if it's going to be 2 different ones? And so I said, well, I'd really like to go to Harold Kleiner's in Louisville. Very sought after job, and very different from Iowa. So she said, he said, well, I'll ring Harold and you know, say that I'm taking you, and what chance that the 6 months before or the 6 months afterwards, you know, a slot. So he fixed up the second half of it for me. And that was a marvelous experience, going to America for a year. It set me up in a way. I was the best trained hand surgeon in the UK. Best trained, probably not very good hand surgeon, but best trained. And so that was uniquely powerful, really. When I came back, I'd had a huge experience over there, and it changed everything, actually. I mean, I know you go to Baltimore and back and so on. Linda and I flew off with 2 children and 22 kilograms of luggage for a year. And it changed both of us. There's no substitute for going away and doing something like that. It gives you a completely different perspective on life. I mean, in the UK, as you know, there are a very large number of junior doctors who are, you know, people of color, and you know, and I'm a Caucasian. When you go there, you suddenly realize that the patients look at you differently. And I wasn't used to this. And, there'd be quite a few Americans who were not beguiled remotely by my beautiful English accent. They knew they've got a problem with their hand and they want to be treated by an American, thank you very much, and not some alien from Europe. That was a new experience. I hadn't had that. So the whole thing was, it just gave you a wider perspective on life, and it never leaves you. So that was brilliant. And then I came back and I did a final year in Oswestry, and then got a job as a part-time hand surgeon in Derby because John Varian was here for 2 or 3 years before. And then he left and went to Dublin.
So was Derby known as a hand centre of excellence at that point?
Yeah. Guy Pulvertaft had developed a personal reputation for hand surgery. He didn't have an OT. There was no hand unit as such. I mean, he just had a personal international reputation for hand surgery, principally related to flexor tendon grafting, and it genuinely had a world reputation for that. Visited by Sterling Burnell and the doyens of hand surgery. But I mean, he had half a physiotherapist, super lady, and he had 2 junior doctors, so it wasn't a department in that sense of the word, and it was really very personal to him. We didn't run courses or anything. That I started that when I arrived. John Varian said, what do you want to do here now that you're here, sort of thing. And I said, well, I think we should run courses for a start. I think we should build a reputation for running really good courses, and bring the best in the world to Derby. Will be reflected partly in their glory. Our fellows will know if you go to Derby that you get a good experience, and interesting people come through, and the courses must run at a profit, not a gross profit, but they can't run at a loss, because there's no facility for that. It has to be at a profit, and that would pay for research and things like that. And so we started, and so we developed really quite a large number of courses. I mean, at their highest, we were doing, I don't know, 15 a year or something.
So when was this? At what point? Like, what year was this?
I mean, we started off with, I don't know, a doctor's course once a year, and the first one of those was the year after I arrived, and that was national. We didn't have any international speakers, but it evolved very quickly into a doctor's course. And would attract about 50 probably. Fascinating group, young consultants and senior registrars, and who ended up, of course, being the future of hand surgery in the United Kingdom, because they all had an expressed interest in it, and we were the only ones that were really offering that at the time. So the courses were very important, and a huge amount of work went into it. It was they were very well organized. I mean, there was small things, but we used to have x-rays in those days. Of course, you'd have x-rays in a bag, and if you wanted to show a sequence of things, then you would put one x-ray up, and then, well, this is what we did, and and so on, and follow it along. And I just said to the fellows, because they were the ones that were presenting, because it's a great opportunity for them to get to know these well-known hand surgeons. It's a good sort of step up potentially. I said I don't want any rooting around in X-ray bags. There must all be an order in there with a paperclip on each one with a date on or whatever. But you must be able to just pick it out and stick it up. We can't have any sloppiness, and they were slick. But that you don't get that unless you work at it. And of course, I was hugely benefited, and I have been throughout my entire professional career, with working with Mary Bradley, who ran the sort of the hand unit. Very organized lady, very strategic. A lot of the developments in hand surgery were designed by me, but a lot of them were designed by her, and a lot of them by both of us. Used to sit 2 desks facing each other at one stage anyway. And that was super because you could bounce ideas off and so on. And she was extraordinarily able lady, who I would never have got the prominence that I may have got if it hadn't been for her. There's no question of that. She was absolutely first class. So that was the courses, and that's how that started.
So what year was this then, Frank?
Oh, God, I've no idea. I think it was 78. I think I started, and something like that. Anyway, and the first course, as I could say, came pretty quickly. But then you've got to be entrepreneurial, and I mean, one of this is very much your street. How do you make the milestones work, that you look back and say, how does a department grow? Because there's now 11 consultants, I think, in the hand unit, half of them plastic, half orthopedic. The things like Shaw Wilgis was a fellow in Derby under Guy Pulvertaft, and always had a strong affinity for it, and came and lectured in Derby for me, and we got on very well indeed. And I developed the notion that I would say to manufacturers of expensive equipment, we would like to be your demonstration center in the United Kingdom. So if you give us a BTE work simulator, for instance, then we would use it. We would write articles using the information gained from it, we would feature it in courses and so on, and obviously would have the benefits of the clinical use of the BT work simulator. And of course, we were hugely helped by Shaw with that, and so that was a way in. I did exactly the same with the Fluoroscan machine. They're 30,000 quid or something. The hospitals acquiring things in a hospital is not easy. It's very slow. You've got to lean, and in the fullness of time, usually a biblical 7 years, then you might get it. But the Fluoroscan was starting off, and the guy who had the contract for that for the UK was a chap I got on very well with. I used to see him at meetings and so on, and he would demonstrate the Fluoroscan machine at our meetings, and so we got one of those for theatre on the same basis, and and then a second one for outpatients. Totally different uses, but actually both hugely helpful. So you've got to be an entrepreneur and sort of sell yourself. One of the things I learned in Louisville was doing microvascular surgery. And so when I came to Derby, we didn't do replants, but we started them with a very small team, which is difficult because you need a large team actually for something like that. A guy came in from JCB, I believe, I'm not sure this is true, but I think it is, that whenever another company who built diggers and dumpers and things introduced a new machine, JCB would acquire one and then really look at it to see, you know, were there things that they needed to learn from this development sort of thing. Very sensible thing to do. Anyway, they were testing some JCB type equivalent, and the thing turned over, and they'd got an engineer on the outside taking measurements of something on the cab, and he got his hand crushed between the edge of the roof and the road, amputated his across the palm. So he came in, and we managed to get it to work again. And it wasn't a perfect hand, but it survived, and he could grip and things. And so I wrote to them afterwards, because we had an operating microscope for nerve work, but it was poor and it was old, and the hospital said it had got no money. And again, that was a £35,000 job or whatever to replace it. So I wrote to JCB and said, would they consider donating 35,000 for a new microscope for the thing, you see. So they said, well, it's done by the trust fund committee. And so they only meet about sort of, twice a year or so, but they're meeting in about a month's time. So come along and make your sort of bid, you see. So anyway, I went along and tried to flog this notion to them. And I got a lovely letter about a week later saying, the committee were very interested in your proposal, and they'd like to offer you, it was exactly half the sum that I needed. And then they just put at the bottom, we thought you were so good, you wouldn't have any difficulty getting the money from someone else. So then, of course, I raced off to the hospital and said, look, I've got this offer from JCB, and but it's time related, which I don't think it was, but it's time related, and can you match it? Well, I mean, the health service will go for that, actually. I mean, if they can, if you've done half the work, and it's obviously something that is necessary, then they'll go for it. And of course, I've got my new microscope. So, but then, I mean, you've got to be like that, Andy, to capture the opportunities, because they're all out there.
Yeah, when we go to the Curtis Hand Centre, we've taken Sarah and Easier Helland and some other guys from Derby as well, to when we're doing training on the BT system. So, and your name crops up every time we go there. So what was your link with the Curtis Hand Centre? Well,
Shaw Wilgis was, as I say, was a fellow of Guy Pulvertoft's, came over and lectured. And he said, oh, you got to come over to Baltimore and lecture and things, which I did. I lectured there a couple of times. And we just got on well together. We had, I'm quite a congenial animal, and I tend to get on with folks, and like a drink and a laugh in the evening and so on. So I kind of think that helps in a way. And we had enormously strong friendships with various places. Indianapolis, Jim Strickland, who came and lectured. The first time I met him was when he lectured in Derby. Absolutely superb lecturer, and for whatever reason, he and Shaw would support us for the remainder of my professional life. Actually, what I worked on, because our format of our courses was a bit different from many, in as much as the faculty, the international faculty, stayed in our houses. So, and Peter and Liz Lunn were super, actually. He was partly orthopedics, partly hand, but he was so committed to hand surgery, and Liz was so loyal to what we were trying to do. Absolutely marvelous. So they would stay with us in our houses, and that produced, I think, sort of quite a close relationship. Linda got on very well with their wives and so on. Used to take them to the wives to Chatsworth House. I had never been to Chatsworth House. In fact, I still have not been around it, but I'm sure Linda could actually do the tour, because she's done it so many times that, and they were very grateful for that. They really enjoyed being sort of, part of the family and having breakfasts together and so on. And so it made for an unusual sort of event. But the last day of every course, usually in the evening over a drink, I would say to the faculty, the American faculty particularly, right, well, you've seen, what happens here. We would already have organized the speakers for the year after, because if you want good people, internationally, you've got to really do it 18 months to 2 years in advance. That's the way it runs. So we'd have the next year's lot organized anyway. I would say to them, we've got these 2 or 3 coming from America next year. What do you think of them, sort of thing? Are they likely to fit in? And so you'd get a bit of a high input into what was likely to happen the year after, whether they were the sort of people that liked the sort of debate that we had. And then, of course, the next question was, well, who should we have for the year after? People who would suit. And you'd get some really very interesting things. Who not to invite. And that your format will not suit some, and it wouldn't suit some, because we were quite questioning of some of the speakers. I remember Graham Lister felt there was some compression on a branch of the ulnar nerve here, and in those days we used to operate on the cases in the afternoon, so he was operating on this, you see, and I'd been a bit mocking about whether this band would be there or not, you see, and it had already been branded the band of bullshit by some of the audience. So I mean, there were some people who wouldn't have liked that. And others who would just think it was good, good fun and a laugh, and well, no trouble. So that's how I chose the speakers, asking at the end of the course the previous folk, who would fit and who wouldn't. And we got a great bunch of speakers over the years, and the people who the course members would come back and back and back and back. They're Christian name terms with Mary and everything. Everyone was, it was a close group, and they were all establishing themselves in hand surgery, growing in the specialty. Lovely to have played a role in that.
No, absolutely. So in terms of that, if you were the first consultant hand surgeon, over what time periods? How did things progress from there, both in this country but also on a worldwide basis?
Well, America was well established. There would be, when I went there as a fellow, there would I'm guessing, Andy, I'm not really sure, but I would no less than 300 or full-time hand surgeons probably in the States in those days, and there's probably a couple of thousand now. There were 2 hand surgery posts in the UK, one in Derby and one in Glasgow. And when I started, and it didn't change, I don't think, much for, I didn't keep a score on it, but I don't think it changed much, probably for about 10 years, maybe. The way it works is the people who ended up doing 100% hand surgery would be plastic surgeons working in a regional center. So there'd be, I don't know, 8 plastic surgeons in a regional center. And that would produce enough cases in that if someone had a real interest in it and was really good, their colleagues would give them sufficient stuff that they didn't have time for anything else. So they would be a full-time hand surgeon. So full-time hand surgery grew, if you like, from that group in regional centers in plastics, and then occasionally orthopedic surgeons being managing to drop everything else because of the reputation they had gained. Now, there were far more orthopedic departments than plastic surgery departments, but if you like, the process of becoming, not doing orthopedic night call and all this sort of thing, it was quite slow for the orthopods to develop 100% hand surgery commitment. But the numbers slowly grew, and now I really don't know what it is. It's probably 150, 200 full-time hand surgeons in the UK. But extraordinary for me because, I've been a witness to the birth of a specialty, and that doesn't come to everyone. And as I say, it's to be able to help that on its way, not just locally but also nationally. It's been an extraordinary career. I've had an absolute ball. Actually, I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. So in terms of BART then, so you were involved in that at the beginning. How did that come about?
They wanted to set up. There was no way. We got this. I think it really started. I suspect with. There were lots of hand therapists coming on our courses, and if the doctor's course, at its most popular, would probably have been 90 people. The therapist course, when it was fully developed, would be 120. These girls had a thirst for knowledge, and they knew that that they were good speakers, and they get the opportunity to ask questions and so on. There'd be social events in the evening where the lecturers would be as well, and so you could pick their brains. And the other thing I insisted on was that the lecturers and the organizers didn't sit on a high table. That the thing was divide and multiply, get out there and just chat to anyone, and share yourselves over all the tables. I mean, some of the Americans would even, they weren't even sitting with their wives. Their wives would be off chatting to another group of therapists and so on. Well, of course, the therapists loved this. And so in a way, there was a group of people who were meeting once a year. I don't want to oversell the Derby bit, actually, but, they were meeting once a year, certainly in Derby, and wanted some they were kind of thirsting for knowledge, but thirsting for recognition as well. And so you know, it was very logical that they would want to set up something like the British Society for Surgery of the Hand. And so the initiative came from totally within them. But then, you know, the call came, you know, would you consider being their first president? Great honor. Yeah, love to. Thank you very much. And so I did that for, I think, a couple of years. And then I know Peter Burge did it, and I'm sure others did it as well. And then they decided that they, you know, they really should have their own people going to be president, and that's how it's continued. So they because and they needed, and it's another thing we did, and I there's lots of things I can look back on and say I'm really pleased I did that. But we designed in Derby, as professor, a diploma in hand therapy, which a lot of our girls have done, and lots of others from around the country, so that they could get recognition of, you know, their status, and that's that was a lovely thing to do, and it's one of the things that I feel was one of the more valuable things I did in my career. I actually introduced a structure where really experienced hand therapists could get accreditation for their ability, and so things continue to grow. So that was it's a bit unstructured, this, I'm afraid, Andy.
Yeah,
I don't know.
no, it's good. So in terms of that then how much influence do you think this had on Sarah going into this area?
I think when she was at school, she our boys earned some money in their sort of mid-teens, portering in the hospital, and Sarah, we encouraged this, some holidays principally, but we encouraged this obviously in them, because it's, you know, it's a life experience. It's good to do, and in Sarah's case, to start off with, she worked as a nursing auxiliary, and on the wards, the orthopedic wards. In those days, you could fix that sort of thing up. I'm sure you can't do that now, actually. But so she, I remember going in one day, causing a bit of a riot, and I drove her in. And then we were going up in the lift to the 4th floor where the orthopedic wards were. And there was just her and me in the lift, you see. So, and she was getting off at one floor, I was getting off on the floor above, I think. So anyway, the doors opened and she said, right, I'm going now, sort of thing, you see. And I gave her a kiss. So she's in her uniform, and, you know, I'm in my white coat, sort of thing, and there are various people milling around outside the lift, sort of thing. Oh, Mr. Burke's kissed a nurse. So you know, they didn't know who she was, and she, when she went on the ward, she was absolutely insistent, and the sister played along, that no one would know that she was my daughter. She didn't want that, and I fully understand that. And so, of course, this made the outrage even greater. So, and then she met Glenys Crooks, who you will remember, I think, who was the lady who ran occupational therapy when I arrived in Derby. A very astute lady. and maybe there wasn't any nursing work available or something, I don't know. But anyway, Sarah went there for 6 weeks and was bowled over by occupational therapy and just loved it. Went back every holiday after that. And then she was, it's like my father telling me to go to Newcastle University. But eventually the discussion arises, of course. What does she want to do career-wise? So and I was chatting to Glenys Crooks about it, and I said to her, she looks as though she's very interested in occupational therapy. Do you think she'd make a good go of that sort of thing? And she said, oh yeah. She said, she will be the head of a department. What? So this is a schoolgirl, and she'll be the head of a department, says Glenys. I said, well, that's a surprise. Child's a layabout, for God's sake. And she'll be a head of a department. And so anyway, she went, and then she applied and went to Northampton to do occupational therapy. We knew Helen McKenna very well, and from our courses, and she was the boss in Nottingham at the Queen's. And Sarah applied for a job there, again on the basis, and she knew Helen, that Helen wouldn't say, whose daughter she was or anything. And so she got a job there, and they both worked in Nottingham for I don't know, a few years. And then Helen moved over to Derby, and then about a year later, Sarah moved over to Derby. And of course, the irony is she has ended up as the manager of the OTs and physios, and runs a very large department now. She's, I think there's about 40 therapists of varying sorts, and she's. I'm very proud of her, actually.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And so in terms of that whole setup now, I mean, it is an incredible facility there, still doing the courses, albeit not currently.
Yeah.
How proud, and in terms of that development of where you started there to seeing what it's like now, like, what do you see the future for the Pulvertaft Centre?
Well, I hope. That's a very difficult question to answer. The first thing I should say is, I've been retired 10 years, and I don't think you can keep revisiting from the grave, sort of thing. So I don't sort of go much. I would drop in and see Sarah occasionally if I'm in the hospital. If I'm in the hospital, it's usually because I got a doctor's appointment. It's reached that stage of life. But I'll drop in and maybe we'll have a cup of coffee or lunch together. I meet the consultants occasionally. Carlos and I will have lunch occasionally in the dining room, the hospital dining room. But of course, all that stopped a year ago. So I'm not really as informed as I should be. I'm the thing about Derby that has always intrigues me, and I love about it is we didn't lose people. We empowered them. We gave them. We didn't tell therapists what to do. Lots of therapists I would chat to, on the courses and over dinner, and the conversation's going on all over the place. It's all very loud, and you can have a quiet chat with a therapist next to you that you've not met before. and all sorts of things come out, and a lot of them were ordered to do various treatments for patients. Now that might be, well, it's never okay as far as I'm concerned, because that's not the way it should work. But if you had a hand surgeon ordering you who was extremely good, then that probably wouldn't be too much of a problem, because you'd be, I mean, these girls were good because they actually informed themselves. They were only on the course because they were getting themselves more knowledgeable. So they were a pretty knowledgeable group, and a lot of them actually were working with hand therapists, hand surgeons, who were quite frankly opinionated and not very good, and that was soul destroying actually for them, and it came out when you spoke to them. So I think the whole business of sharing knowledge and so on, but we never really lost people, because they knew they had a voice in the department, and that interesting new things would be happening. There'd be new developments here, there, and everywhere. And within the department, you didn't need to go to get to a new opportunity. One was probably going to crop up within the department. And so that was very helpful from our point of view. What are the opportunities now? I don't know. I think this is where I'm very ignorant, Andy. But there are certainly in rehabilitation, there are very exciting things going on in the dealing with the psychological problems of patients. I've forgotten the name of the process, that the therapy process, the counseling that goes with it. I've forgotten what it's called. But it appears to have, from what I hear from Sarah and others, quite dramatic effects on the outcome of patients. And I was having an interesting chat with Chris Bainbridge. Everyone's obsessed with, reasonably, with outcomes and so on. If you get a patient who has a carpal tunnel decompression, you've got two patients, should we say, one, they both have carpal tunnel decompressions. One's depressed and the other isn't. They'll have a profoundly different outcome. So the whole business of, if you can actually optimize what's going on in the head, you can have a dramatic effect on the pain, the use of a hand, and so on. And I think that that's really largely within occupational therapy and physiotherapy. And I think that's a massive thing, it seems to me, at the moment. From the doctor's point of view, they now have a big team, in as much as they've probably got 8 people who can do microvascular surgery well. And that's, so they should be able to provide a good service for that. And the other thing, of course, is the new rehabilitation hospital for the military, not a million miles from Derby. We're very fortunate in having Kate Brown, who is a consultant hand surgeon in the department, but one week in 7 or something, she actually works on the major injury unit in the Queen's, because she is, in fact, I forget her rank, but I think she's a major in the military. And so it's hand surgery for most of her time, but sort of major injuries in Nottingham at the Queen's for part of the time. And in terms of the rehab, simplistically to me, in terms of the rehab of servicemen, with hand injuries. I think it would be lovely if Derby could find a role, and a role could be found for Derby in that area. That just seems to me, that's just win-win. People who really need it, they've done a great service to the country. It's our obligation to absolutely optimize them. It'd be lovely if it was felt that Derby could play a role in that. So I can see those two things, one in therapy, one, but it's a pretty ignorant. I mean, there'll be all sorts of other things that opportunities. We've never been short of opportunities, actually. Yeah, we've been short of the time to develop them sometimes. Never been short of the number of opportunities. But you've got to be positive. You see, I remember walking up the corridor in the hospital, and some initiative had occurred. I was walking up with one of the orthopedic surgeons, as it happens, and not the most demonstrative person. And he was saying, "Oh, I'm really worried about this, that they're introducing this thing. It's going to have a catastrophic effect or something." And I said, "Oh, well, look at it the other way around. There are opportunities here. And, and I think if we do this and, that sort of thing, you see." And in a rare show of warmth, this guy threw his arm around my shoulder and said, "Oh, Frank," he said, "you would say that, wouldn't you?" but you've got to look, you've got to look for opportunities in strife. And I've always been a great believer that I've never done judo in my life, but it seems to me judo harnesses the dynamic of a situation. And so if the hospital produces or the government produces a new directive, I and Mary would sit down and try and work out how we can harness something we want to do onto the back of this, and then say to management, we'd love to lead with this, and so to encourage the others and all this, if you want to sort of, get us going on it first, we're very happy, but what chance of adding this other bit in as well? And as often as not, you're solving the hospital's problem, for goodness sake. And, they'd say, "Oh, no, get on with it." And so you've got to look for opportunities where they exist. And I've been an optimist, really. I've been thanked for my enthusiasm more than my ability, I suspect, over the years.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's not the case, but I think that's a great attitude. I think that's the case in a lot of things. It's like,
oh yeah, it's universal, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's great. Now, finally, just wanted to ask you, talked about loads of things, which is great to hear about it. But you mentioned about having a lack of time. So in your spare time, you made a throwaway comment about you've just started writing another novel, which I didn't even know you did that. So do you want to tell me how you got started in terms of doing that?
Well, I think doctors do a lot of writing, reports and things. And I had a very large medical legal practice. And so, you could say a medical report is a 5-page story, if you like, 5 sheets of A4, and it's very stylized and the like, but, it's someone who's had an accident and this, that, and the other. So I think we use words a lot, and I love words. When I was at school, I got slightly out of step with I should have had to do medicine, additional maths, as it was called in those days. It won't be a phrase but it was a sort of slightly higher maths if you were going to do sciences. And I hadn't done that. And so, and having decided to do medicine, they said, "Well, you're going to have to do additional maths." And I think there were 2 other things they felt I should do. I'd got 6 O levels already, but I had to do these. So I'd got 3 things, AO maths and a couple of other O levels. And they said, "Well, you can't go through a year like that. You'll have to do something else." So I said, "I'd like to do history." So they said, "Oh, well, we'll go away and have a look at that because, to see if the 2 streams will allow that, because they're very different." and they wrote back and said, yeah, it fits. So, and I had a very charismatic history teacher, super guy, and I loved it. And I got A-level history and the 3 O levels, and then went on to do what we all had to do then, which was A-level physics, chemistry, biology, for the last 2 years at school. But the history stayed with me, and I loved it. I stopped reading really novels when I was a houseman, and I don't really think I picked up much in terms of reading, apart from on holiday, until I was a consultant. And I don't know whether you've been through this business. If your life is so busy, you're flying back from a holiday, and you're furiously trying to finish the book that you've been reading, because you know bloody well that if you don't get it done by the time the plane lands, you'll never finish the book, because you're going to be just pitched back into normal life. So, and then I started a lot of historical, I like historical novels, naval things, and so on. And so I then, actually, it's a fascinating business, actually, writing, because I thought I'd write a novel, and the first one was this was when I'd retired, and the first one was a modern day about informed consent, effectively, but it was. Well, it could have been in your. The guy was a trade representative for a surgical instrument company, and he's been to a conference in the south of France, and he's asked to take a tray of instruments up to Paris because a consultant there wants to use them. So he's on the high-speed train, and the train crashes. And so a lot of people die, stuck in a river, come off a bridge. And 3 girls are trapped by their ankle because the carriage is buckled. And the water level is rising. And he is the only other survivor. And behind his seat, he's got a tray of instruments, orthopedic instruments. I'll leave it at that. and the dilemmas that go with that. And I just enjoyed it, Andy, actually. And then I wrote a historical novel about Saint Helena and a fisherman there and his wife. And the scene is set really in the first paragraph. This girl, my heroine, lives in a small settlement on Saint Helena, and about 100 people. And so she grows up there, and someone she's been to school with and she likes, he's a friend, proposes to her. And her brother, as he walks away at the end of the sort of discussion on it, where she doesn't say yay or nay, her brother says to her, "It's probably the best offer you will get, because there's no choice. You know, there's very few people there." And it's how her life goes on from there. And that was the first book. And then the second one, here. The second one was to do with she moves to Europe, and so she's doing various things in Europe, and that went quite well. It's to do with piracy and various other things. And it follows the history of the time quite accurately. So I do work from historical things. And then the third one of those, which is where I thought it would finish actually, was she goes to the Crimean War, and so she's there. And what you may not remember is that the Crimean War was a bit of an embarrassment for us. And we didn't do overly well in it. In fact, more people died from illness than they did from fighting the Russians. But the thing that followed it within a year was the Indian Mutiny. So anyway, in February, when I can see all the stuff that I normally do I had no plans to take Ruth any further than the Crimean War. But and then I just thought that this sort of all the volunteering and the educational stuff was all going up in smoke. Then I thought, I'm going to have to do something. So Ruth has now fought her way through the Indian Mutiny, and is now she's now well and truly finished. I don't intend to write a fifth one, but it's enormous fun, Andy. You've no idea how long. Ideally, they should be 120,000 words or 100,000 or something like that. Not really less than 100,000, I don't think. And when you start off, of course, you've no idea where it's really going to go, and certainly how long it's going to be. And all of mine have ended up, quite sort of reasonable length. They're not too long, they're not too short. And you can drop something into chapter 3 and pick it up in chapter 8. And there are threads, that you can weave. And storytelling is great fun. So no, I love it.
Yeah. No, well, that is amazing. So you're definitely squeezing a lot of things into there, but I want to thank you very much for talking to me about that. It's been really, really interesting. And we've met a couple of times and we've spoken about some of these things, but it's amazing to hear that you were there at the inception of all of this. So I really appreciate you telling your story.
I've had a ball. Thank you very much, Andy.
No problem. Thanks, Frank. All the best. Thank you.
Take care.